For this season, obviously, you know, the idea would have been great to have had a show. This is not feasible. We were kind of into this idea that, you know, the show has been cancelled as a kind of narrative backdrop to the collection. And this idea of the headline. So we've produced a newspaper. And at the same time, we are then kind of making a kind of time capsule, kind of like a tin box in which the newspaper is folded into. And inside that is a kind of like a de-embossed print on leather. And you have like a kind of letter opener. The big kind of surprise within it is that we have worked with the writer Daniel Steele, who I've always kind of admired as this kind of prolific writer that really encourages people globally to read, which I think is something which is so important. And I just thought it was nice to put a literary backdrop to the collection, like something where, you know, that kind of immediacy that you get when you start reading a novel. In this collection, we kind of looked a lot at draping and how draping could be kind of knotted into an object. So you have a disc or it folds in. And this idea of playing with the sleeve in a way where it became something which was quite graphic, but at the same time had a softer edge to it. So you have a lot of suede jackets where you have a kind of boyish shoulder in suede. I think there's always nothing more seductive than a coat worn as a dress. So we have an amazing yellow kind of leather coat that is worn on its own. And I think there's something about that is quite empowering as a garment. I always think a coat is something where you can either cocoon, you can make it sensual, you can make it drape, but ultimately it is a singular garment. Over the past like 3 or 4 collections, tailoring has been a kind of big mission for me. This season we kind of looked at this idea of like making it as a cotton structure so that it was more elongated, looking at kind of like 20s horse riding jackets or even earlier than that. For this collection, I kind of was looking at this idea of blown up abstraction of men's shoes, like something which contradicted the look, but with height. We've kind of taken a moccasin and our kind of sock, or leather sock detail, and we have made a platform. And I kind of like the kind of boyish edge it gives to the women's, and I think it sort of somehow kind of subverses the look. And then we have in the collection as well these sort of buckled shoes, which are a detail that kind of goes throughout the collection. I've always been kind of fascinated by buckles on 17th century and 18th century shoes. And I like this idea that they became de-embossed by wrapping the leather around it. When we're building looks, I always think a bag and a shoe can kind of like twist a look. It can kind of change it. For this collection, we have brought back the Amazona, which is an historical bag to Loewe, which was made very famous in the 70s. Our technical set becoming even more advanced, I was like, how do we make this bag even better? Our kind of big development this season has been the Goya bag. We've been developing how we would be able to get to a harder construction. The Goya for me is this sort of like birth of a new icon. It is incredibly well made. I really wanted to kind of work out how a bag could be something which was quite jewelry-like and at the same time timeless in its approach. As well in this collection, we have supersized the flamenco. It is one of my favorite bags. And I've always thought it had that kind of energy to it, this idea of subtleness. And I thought this idea of blowing it up. And it really kind of showcases leather in its sort of raw state, in its sort of like in its purest form. And the last kind of fun bag that we have is a bracelet bag, which is kind of like a pleated piece of leather. If we ever go back to going out at night, I thought it was quite nice to have like a bracelet that could turn into a bag. As well, in the collection, you have this sort of like embellishment saturated into the prints, so that when you look at them, they geometrically they register, but at the same time texturally, they kind of bring a depth of field. As well, in the season, we worked with the major embroidery houses around the world on the prints and on the fronts of dresses, and even on the kind of brooch sort of drape rings. They are heavily embroidered, but in a way that was more subtle and something where it was more personal to the wearer. Clothing is an amazing kind of thing to work with right now, especially when things are so restricted, because you can kind of have this idea of a fantasy that can become a reality. This season, I do think there is a very strong psychedelic influence to it. I was thinking of this idea of color therapy, that you wear color to make you happy. By projecting into it, it can uplift us. And I think color is one of the most important things for that.